Good morning, Bande Matram. This morning, on this glorious occasion, we are going to discuss a great topic that is, of course, human nature, weaknesses of human nature. The topic of discussion, the caption will be weaknesses of the human nature. Brilliant topic. Most of the time, people want to know about this weaknesses of this human nature as a whole. This is the oft inquired topic. Most of the places throughout our speeches or resource distribution or our classes. Anyway, we go to discuss this topic in detail, of course, in many occasions, in many formats, in many ways, many forms we have discussed. Today, of course, we are going to discuss this topic, of course, in brief. That is weaknesses of the human nature. So here two words are there. One is human nature, another is weakness. On both the words, we will go to discuss a little bit from the combined philosophy of the modern Sri Aurobindo. It will be a linear approach, very fundamental approach. So both will combine both in few lines from Mother and a few lines from Sri Aurobindo. It will be a combined effort towards the discussion, of course. So while we are discussing of the first of all, the thing we'll take from Sri Aurobindo, that the human nature. Again, we'll come to the weaknesses. So what human nature really meant as per the description and the definition by given by Sri Aurobindo, defined by Sri Aurobindo, explained by Sri Aurobindo. During the course, the variation in human nature are too great to be covered by a single transient rule. It is variable, like the flow of the air, wind, of course, it changes. The flow of the river, it changes. So also there is variation of the human nature. This is too great, not any ordinary phenomenon or ordinary style. It is too great to be covered by a single transient rule. So one rule, single transient rule can't be, of course, sufficient to observe the variations of the human nature. Difficult. Again, during the course, the human soul and the nature, both human soul and the nature. Initially, it was quoted only human nature. Now it's a human soul and human nature. Human nature can't be dealt with by a set of mental rules. The rules we are fencing, we are actually fabricating, these are all mental rules. So these are the mental rules, these are fabricated by the human being. So the human soul and the nature can't be dealt with by a set of mental rules applicable to everybody in the same way. Maybe it is applicable to some, but for another, for the rest may not be applicable. So to everybody in the same way, difficult. This is not at all possible. One must not treat human nature like a machine to handle. So, like some machines we are handling mechanically in the normal, in the monotonous process, it is not like this. One must not treat a human nature like a machine to be handled according to the rigid mental rules. This has to be done. These machines are handled and actually effectuated. It works by the rigid rules. But human nature can't be dealt with rigid mental rules. So for that, what has to be done? Great amount of plasticity is required. That plasticity is needed for dealing with the complex motifs. Original motifs, to some extent, for some, in some ways, in some formats, it can be applicable, but for the most and for the most generalization, it is not possible to go with a single rule for the entire human being and in the entire process. Difficult, not at all possible. Again, we'll try to explain the second part, that is the weaknesses. The weaknesses of the human nature. We came to know that human nature is variable. It can't be, it's for some sort of plasticity is required for the proper channelization. No fixed mental rule. So that can actually handle the entire complex problems of the human being. Here another part as quoted as here in the course, that is what are the weaknesses really we affront on the way when we are progressing and we are actually sticking the path we are moving. Mother, here in the course, silence actually no weakness in the nature can be for long be an obstacle. So if the weaknesses are not observed, if we are not rectifying the weaknesses, then it will be difficult for us in the larger time. Stage in time steps 9. So no weakness. Even if it is coming as a hurdle for us, but not at all obstacle. It must turn because no weakness in the nature can be for long be an obstacle. Never it can be an obstacle. It has to be rectified. It has to be changed. It has to be overcome. It has to be surmounted. And in the long initially, at the initial part of the hour, it may be felt so, but in long run, it must be overcome. It can't be ever repeating flux. If, like some long obstacle, it can't stand against your in the course. All weakness is strength. So where we are using the weakness, at the very side there stands the term strength. So all weakness in strength hiding itself from its own vision, hiding its strength, actually hiding itself from its own vision, that are the all weaknesses. Again, we'll go and quote interestingly, very interestingly, what Mother really tries to quote on this topic, of course, weakness of human nature. We have seen few terms. Mother has quoted few terms that are the weaknesses of the human nature. Few Mother quotes few terms. One is actually fear, is a bad advisor we know. Second is actually doubt. Next comes depression. Next actually suffering. And again we meet across the road actually material desires. That these are the weaknesses which stands. Another is greed, and the next comes the conquest of the desire. For that actually we are interested to know. Again comes the obstacle or barrier, the weakness, that is ego. Then actually we quarrel among ourselves. Quarrel is also one great factor in that comes in the process of weakness, in the form of weakness. Anyway, we'll try to quote one or few in Mother's writings. We'll see what Mother and how she has defined the term. Very interestingly, Mother quotes here the fear. Yoga and fear don't go together. Very straight format. Mother tried to quote, tried to explain. Yoga and fear can't go together. And again, Mother quotes, fear is always a very bad advisor. So it has come from the lower vital. It is a very bad advisor. Mother quotes it. Again, how can it be? Someone can be free from ego. You can be entirely free from fear. This is the first format we are taking, free from the fear, only when you have driven out of all your violence. Some violence is there that is creating fear psychosis in you. So when you are driven out of that violence, naturally you will be entirely free. That is eventually expressive. It is the needful. Again, Mother quotes of the doubt, that is the greatest weakness in human progress, human nature. Doubt is not a sport to indulge in with impunity. It is a poison which drop by drop corrodes the soul. It is a poison not only poisoning the body, and of course it is poisoning the soul. We must decide to get rid of all doubts. It must not exist. All doubts we must try to get rid of. They are among the worst enemies of our progress. With doubt, of course, that is actually creating a great hindrance on the way. Again, we'll go for the next one, next thing to be discussed, that is actually depression. So, Mother quotes, a depression is always unreasonable as it leads nowhere. Unreasonable, not acceptable, because it leads nowhere. It must be subtle enemy of the yoga. It is the most subtle enemy of the yoga. So depression must be overcome. So it is the ego that gets depressed. Ego hiding behind the veil. It is the ego which gets depressed. Don't mind it. Go on entirely quietly with your work, and the depression will disappear. Again, we are facing the next one, is that is suffering. Where ignorance is there, suffering too must come. And Mother comes quotes here: the world is full of sufferings and sorrows, packed with sorrows and suffering. Wherever you go, whatever you face, whomever you come across, actually things you will find the only suffering and sorrows. One should try to never to be the cause of any additional suffering. So it is already packed with suffering. Don't try to be and to try create an cause of any additional suffering. Again, the terms which are coming on the way, these are all laziness, tiredness, and the fatigue. These are also the weaknesses of the human nature. It is dangerous illness. It is a dangerous illness, that is laziness. Tiredness shows lack of the will to for progress. Lack of will for progress. When you feel tired or fatigued, that is the lack of your will for progress. You are lacking the will for progress. For that, actually, tiredness and fatigue is coming. Fire is always burning in you. Try to develop. Let it come forward. Let it burn fluently. Let it go upward. That is the condition. That is the criteria. So, fatigue comes when doing comes from the doing without interest in all things you do. You do something but without interest. For that, actually, fatigue comes and surrounds. Again, we go for the next one, which is the weakness that is faced by the human being. Human nature facing the weaknesses. That is actually material desires. Don't expect any satisfaction from physical life, and you will no more be tired of it. So desire is the child heart's cry crying for be bliss. We are bound wholeheartedly to the bounds of the human desires. Some other quotes: "What is truly needed will surely come." So never desire. In the age of the desire brings the happiness. So if desire is gone, so your sorrow is gone. Things must be asked only for only when they are needed. Whatever the God divine is granting you, sending you, that must be accepted with gladness. That is the criteria, that is the condition that will to be taken care of. Next one which comes on the way, that is greed. So you know greed is a great obstacle, great poison. So mother quotes, the sadhaka must eat to satisfy the needs of his body. But what he does and don't meet the demands of his greed. Another quotation we have seen, eat for living, don't live for eating. And because what is most requirement that can be for the satisfaction of the your body, what is needed, that only can be consumed. Again, mother quotes, greed for anything concerning physical consciousness, so-called necessities and comfort of our whatever nature. This is one of the most serious obstacle for sadhana. Greed for anything concerning the physical consciousness, so-called necessities and the comforts of the life, but actually that is not the need of the sadhakas in our yoga. We need something else, that is perfection. Now, for ordinary life, this desire and this need, these comforts, they are necessary. But for this spiritual life, it is actually required. Each little satisfaction you get through greed is one step backward to the goal. So don't try to fulfill it, don't desire it. That is actually creating hindrance in you. Again, how can we conquest upon the desire? It is only by conquering the desires that you can get rid of them, and coming out of the this consciousness of the lower nature and rising to a higher consciousness. Yielding to desire is not the way of getting rid of them. You have to know end of desires, we know. Then what we have to do, either they will be satisfied with replaced by another, and they can go on clamoring more and more. Anyway, it must be overcome. The next one, a desire that knows that it will never be satisfied that will vanish. To conquer a desire brings a more joy than to satisfy it. Again, we'll go for that ego. Ego was the helper, ego is the bar. Ego thinks that what it wants and has not. This is the constant preoccupation. The soul is aware of what it is given and lives in the endless gratitude. So that must be got rid of. Then again, quarrels. When two-person quarrel, both are at wrong. Definitely, we must know. Again, we will go that narrowness and one-sidedness that is standing on the way we must get rid of. These are the things where they are the weaknesses in the